Welcome to NP Certification Q&A, presented by Fitzgerald Health Education Associates. This podcast is for NP students studying to pass their NP certification exam. Getting to the correct test answers means breaking down the exam questions themselves. Expert Fitzgerald faculty clinicians share their knowledge and experience to help you dissect the anatomy of a test question so you can better understand how to arrive at the correct test answer. So, if you're ready, let's jump right in.
A 19-year-old male is in your office for evaluation of profound anxiety. He is in his first year of college, and last week there was an active shooter on campus. 3 people were killed. Although he didn't know any of them, it was in the building where he has one of his classes, and he is having severe anxiety and nightmares. He gets significantly distressed when discussing this with anyone. He feels detached from his friends and even his family, is having trouble sleeping, and finds himself getting angry with everyone for no good reason. The psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner explores for additional symptoms to support a diagnosis of A. Post-traumatic stress disorder, B. Acute stress response, C. Dissociative disorder, or D. Panic disorder. So this clearly is a diagnosis question. It's evaluating your understanding of basic diagnostic criteria and how to differentiate and prioritize here. And so, as you look through the differential diagnoses of this phenomenon, there's a lot of good information here. There's really not enough to make a diagnosis of anything, but the question for you is, the psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner explores for additional symptoms to support a diagnosis of what? And of these 4 answer choices, the only one that works, the correct answer is B, acute stress response. This is very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder, except that symptom onset is between 3 days and 1 month from the traumatic event. And so clearly, that's the cardinal feature, and that's what we're dealing with here. There was an active shooter on campus last week. So the traumatic event between 3 days and 1 month, for that you are evaluating for an acute stress response. And beyond that, beyond the exposure to a traumatic event, now we are looking for 9 symptoms from the PTSD criteria. And you have several of them here. You have, in addition to the traumatic event, you have the severe anxiety and nightmares, the distress when this topic comes up, the sense of detachment, the difficulty sleeping, and the anger and irritability. So you've got several symptoms here. We don't quite have diagnostic criteria for an acute stress response yet, but it is appropriate for you to explore for additional symptoms to support that diagnosis. Because again, as your answer choice says, you're looking for 9 symptoms from PTSD criteria. PTSD is different. PTSD onset, by definition, the onset of symptoms as at least 1 month after the traumatic event. And so for that reason alone, that differential doesn't work here. But also with PTSD, the symptom criteria are much more specific and widespread. In addition to that traumatic event at least 1 month ago, 1 month ago or longer, you also for PTSD are very specifically looking for one intrusion symptom. Intrusion symptoms are things like recurrent involuntary distressing memories, recurrent bad dreams, dissociative reactions, physiologic reactivity. There's a number of them, but for PTSD, you're looking for an intrusion symptom as well as one avoidance symptom. The avoidance symptoms are just like the name says. You try to avoid distressing memories or thoughts, trying to avoid external reminders like maybe being near that building. In addition, PTSD also requires 2 negative alterations. 2 negative alterations include things like alterations in mood and cognition, things like distorted cognition, negative emotional state, anhedonia, feeling of detachment from others, inability to experience positive emotions. So PTSD needs at least 2 of those. And then finally, 2 alterations in arousal and reactivity. So you can see the difference very clearly. PTSD is very precise. The traumatic event at least 1 month ago, and 1 intrusion symptom, 1 avoidance symptoms, 2 negative alterations in cognition and mood, and 2, marked alterations in arousal and reactivity. Acute stress response isn't nearly that precise. An acute stress response is just a response that has happened after a stressor between 3 days and 1 week ago, or rather 3 days and 1 month ago, and any 9 of those symptoms. They could be all from the intrusion category, all from the negative mood and cognition category. So it's just a much broader symptom criteria. And those are the 2 primary differentials here between which you have to distinguish. Dissociative disorder is not necessarily linked to a traumatic event. We do typically think of dissociation as a consequence of a history of trauma, but it's not necessarily that. And some people do just dissociate for no apparent reason. And when it interferes with social or occupational or interpersonal function, then it becomes a disorder. And panic disorder may share some features at a glance, but panic disorder really is different. It doesn't have those distinct separate categories of symptom expression. And panic disorder, there is no traumatic event. We don't know why the panic attacks occur. They just occur unexpected and unprovoked, which is a distinct feature of panic disorder. So this is just a good opportunity for you to review some of the diagnostic criteria of those various disorders and be familiar with them, because you will be expected, of course, in your boards to be able to differentiate among the leading differential diagnoses when you are presented with a collection of symptoms.
Thank you for listening to NP Certification Q&A, presented by Fitzgerald Health Education Associates. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. And for more NP resources, visit FHEA.com.